All right, we're here with the first video of the day. We're going to talk about some of the protesting that's been happening over in Philadelphia, and the National Guard is being called out, so we'll talk about that a little bit. France is having a surge in, I guess, traffic over the lockdowns because apparently people are fleeing, and the Muslim community in France as well is, I guess, not even really just in France, but in many different parts of Europe, are just burning a Macron picture. Yeah, we got a lot to talk about. Let's just get into it. Up first, we got Fox News. National Guard arrives in Philadelphia after nights of unrest following Walter Wallace Jr.'s death. Governor Tom Wolf authorized the troop deployment on Tuesday. Additional Pennsylvania National Guard arrived in Philadelphia on Friday to bolster protections after days of rioting. Won't that close? Following the police-involved shooting of a black man, as guardsmen arrived and organized themselves, at least one passerby kept shouting, "You are 3 days too late. Where were you 3 days ago?" Walter Wallace Jr. was shot Monday by two officers responding to a domestic call about someone with a weapon. Authorities said Wallace was armed with a knife and charged at the officers when he was shot. Hundreds took to the streets in protest that quickly turned violent, and we saw that there was so much destruction. That's pretty much what we covered. If anyone saw, one of, I think, what was it, yesterday's Steven Crowder live stream, the morning one, they had Elijah Schaefer on, and he was going through a lot of what was being destroyed, his encounter, because he'd gotten beat up by a bunch of these rioters just being there, for being white, essentially. That's what he claims, at least. Apparently, I guess they were saying, there's a white guy, let's get him, like stuff like that. So, and yeah, they're supposed to be the non-racist group. Okay, yeah. Looting and rioting became more prevalent on the second night, prompting Governor Tom Wolf to authorize the deployment of National Guard troops as police struggled to contain the protests and riots that broke out across the city. Struggled to contain them? In certain areas, they didn't even try, because they knew they'd lose. Initial troops arrived on Wednesday, but additional troops have arrived as city center becomes more heavily guarded, Fox 29 reported. About 30 police officers have been injured, with one officer intentionally run over by a pickup truck while others were pelted with objects. Armor-clad state troopers and police gathered at the Municipal Services Building to be dispatched across the city. And that's all they have to say on it, I guess. So they got the National Guard there in Philadelphia. Hopefully that'll quell some of the unrest that is happening. Fingers crossed. But, as the passerby said, yeah, you're pretty much 3 days late. A lot of these rioters are pretty much just, they've got everything they need, and they're going to now just sell it off. Now that the National Guard's in, they're not going to go out. They're just going to now sit inside and try to sell off what they stole. All right, let's move on to what's happening in France. Says from Daily Mail, escape from Paris. City is gridlocked as tens of thousands flee. Stations are packed. Violent protests break out, and shelves are stripped ahead of month-long lockdown that bans travel. Thousands of Parisians, that's a weird word to try to say, caused massive traffic jams as they tried to flee the French capital for the country. Huge numbers of locals attempted a mass exodus in a bid to avoid the start of the second national lockdown. So we got tens of thousands of Parisinians, who knows what, Paris citizens last night caused massive traffic jams in a desperate attempt to flee the French capital ahead of the start of Emmanuel Macron's new national shutdown. Video posted to Twitter shows huge numbers of Paris citizens attempting a mass exodus out of the city in a bid to avoid the 9 p.m. curfew and the start of the second lockdown from midnight. The night air was filled with the sound of blaring car horns, while social media users estimated that Paris citizens had created hundreds of miles of gridlock to escape to their second homes in the country. I swear, I think this author is just in love with this word now. He's like, I got a new word for people that live in Paris. I'm going to use it super hard. Meanwhile, revelers also seized the opportunity to spend one last night with friends and family last night before bars and restaurants are closed as the French government plunges the country back into lockdown. Meanwhile, French people emptied supermarkets in a repeat of the panic buying that swept Europe in March as Paris citizens and other city dwellers prepared for a month in confinement. Shoppers stocked up on pasta and toilet rolls While people queued outside the hairdressers for a final trim, office workers in the capital's business district hauled their equipment to cars and trains in preparation for WFH. Emmanuel Macron's draconian measures are due to be enforced until at least December 1st, with people required to carry documents justifying their reason for leaving home that will be subject to police checks. So there was a new trailer that came out, I believe it's called Songbird, for a movie that was basically about a pandemic and draconian lockdowns and literally what France is pretty much now going through. That movie, the movie was about it was in 2024 with a virus called COVID-23. I mean, it's a little bit, it was definitely in poor taste to try to then come out with a movie, especially during this time on this very specific subject. And now we're seeing from France, that's literally reality from what that movie had shown in the trailer. This is literally becoming reality. There was a guy that was out and he was like, I'm safe, I'm immune. You see he has like a wristband. Now people are going to have papers in order to move around, basically say, we're immune, we're immune. What are they going to be shot if they're not, or arrested or whatever? It's quite draconian, and I guarantee you there's going to be anti-lockdown protests probably within the first week. I wouldn't be surprised. So you can see from all these pictures, just people fleeing. They're getting mad. And like, I don't trust these numbers that come out. Like, that's the problem, is I don't trust all these numbers. Like, oh, we got spikes in cases and all this other stuff, and now the deaths are going to start spiking up. It's like, well, I don't really trust that your actual judgment, because you guys were lying before about who was really dying. And we also know 94% of those deaths weren't just from COVID. Only 6% of the U.S. deaths were strictly COVID related. And don't tell me that, like, okay, they still died from COVID, though. It's like, well, they could have just died from the flu then, too. If they have these problems, the flu is just as bad to get. So who's to say that it wasn't the flu? Especially when the flu cases are now down 98% from last year. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're also using the flu and the common cold and just calling it COVID to then try to justify their draconian lockdowns. Even with this inflated number that I'm just, guessing at. This is just an opinion. I just lost where I was going to go. Never mind. Let's just move on. We got anti-Macron fury rages across the Muslim world, with thousands burning effigies and stamping on pictures of his face after Erdogan issues string of inflammatory attacks. It says the Muslim world renewed its anger at Emmanuel Macron today after the French president remained unbowed by Thursday's terror attack in Nice and vowed that we will not give any ground on freedom of expression. But you're locking down... But now you're gonna lock down Paris and for an entire month, and just have these draconian measures. I'm sorry, but Emmanuel Macron, you kind of almost deserve this stuff at this point, because it's bad. You're going way too authoritative with this, and Muslims don't seem to like you. Your own citizens aren't going to like you. Nobody is going to like Macron. Let's move on to then the Washington Free Beacon here, because they've got, I guess, just a take on what's going to be happening. They say the next populist revolt column, the combustible politics of a coronavirus dark winter. They say for the past half-decade, Europe has acted as a preview of coming attractions in American politics. The reaction to the confluence of immigration and terrorism on the continent foreshadowed the direction the Republican Party would take under Donald Trump. The surprise victory of Leave in the Brexit referendum hinted at Trump's unexpected elevation to the presidency. The terrible images from coronavirus-stricken Italy last March offered a glimpse into New York's future. This week, when Italian authorities reimposed curfews, restrictions on businesses, and bans on communal gatherings, violent protests broke out in Turin, Milan, and Naples. Consider it a taste of the next populist revolt. I mean, people don't want to be in these lockdowns anymore. That's what's really happening. And we even know that the CDC and the WHO is saying against these lockdowns now. They've already flip-flopped and say these lockdowns are destroying the economy. Economists are even saying that. But no, they want to have their authoritarian rules set in place. They want power, and that's what most of these governments want. And the people aren't going to stand for it. It says lockdowns remain the preferred tool of governments whose public health authorities decide the coronavirus is out of control. In September, Israel shut down for a month during the Jewish holidays to reduce its coronavirus infection rate. In October, New York City targeted certain neighborhoods, and those were Jewish neighborhoods. In recent days, Newark ordered non-essential businesses to close at 8 p.m. A county judge imposed a curfew on El Paso, and Massachusetts has gone back and forth on whether schools should be open or closed. This response has placed the public under extraordinary strain. When officials tell businesses to close, they not only deny individuals who can't work from home the opportunity to earn a living, they also impose social costs that much of the public is increasingly unwilling to bear. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report that depression, substance abuse, and suicidal ideation increased during the spring. Extended families, limited contact, religious practice was curtailed. Having canceled spring holidays, Americans are now informed that Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas need to be reconsidered as well. When individuals inevitably question, disregard, or disobey the commands of science, they are censored, stigmatized, condescended to, or punished. Nor is expert authority the only form of power at work. In spite of evidence that schools are not sites of widespread transmission and remote education harms children in incalculable ways, only 39 of the 50 largest school districts have reopened for at least some in-person instruction. In Fairfax County, Virginia, the teachers union has called for schools to remain closed at least until September 2021. They just don't want to work, and then they're going to say, "Oh, we need to get paid though for the whole year." Amidst the many Biden-Harris lawn signs are a few for Open FCPS, a parent-driven campaign to resume in-person instruction. The parents are circulating a petition to recall members of the school board who oppose bringing the students back. Governments resort to shutdowns to impose discipline on an unruly population, but shutdowns do not solve the problem. They turn public health crises into economic and social ones. After a while, the price of shutdowns grows too high. The government reopens the economy, the virus returns. Before long, the cycle repeats. I mean, based on what they say, they're saying, "Oh, it's coming back, but the flu is super down this year, guys, because COVID is just destroying the flu somehow." This response is placed, we read that. Governments resort to shutdowns to impose discipline on an unruly population, but shutdowns do not solve the problem. They turn public health crises into economic social ones. Yeah, I just said that. Okay. There are plenty of ways to think about the politics of the Trump era. You can analyze the parties according to the traditional left-right axis. You can study public debate through the prism of liberal democracy versus authoritarianism. You can understand recent elections as pitting establishment insiders against populist outsiders. You can see the ideological contest as a three-way grudge match between common good conservatives, neoliberals in both parties, and woke progressives. Coronavirus has spawned yet another interpretive framework. In this frame, politics is the struggle between the fraction that wants to keep the economy and society relatively open during the pandemic and the fraction that is ready and willing to shut them down. Joe Biden has been able to straddle these two poles. He says you can have a relatively open society as well as a public health system that reduces infection to a negligible level. He says he will shut down the virus, not the country, but he'll just shut down the virus, take away your guns, raise your taxes. Because that's literally what his proposals and all he's really said about his campaign so far. What he hasn't explained is how that can happen in the absence of a widely administered vaccine. Only Taiwan and South Korea contained outbreaks without nationwide lockdowns. It is hard to see the United States replicating their success. Taiwan benefited from its rapid response at the outset of the crisis. South Korean authorities rapidly approved tests while enjoying access to cell phone data. None of that happened here. If Biden takes office during the dark winter, he prophesized at the final presidential debate, he will have to decide, in addition to his national mask mandate, whether to put the country through another 30 days to slow the spread. I mean, at first we were told 15 days to slow the spread, then 30 days, then 2 months, and then it's becoming 8 months, 9 months, and here we are. The bureaucratic pressure to shut down will be immense. The media, entertainment, and technology sectors will be sure to support and promote his decision. Polarization between red states and the nation's capital will intensify. The commanding heights of culture and business will consign the Republican Party to the ash heap of history. And opposition to the restoration of progressive rule will manifest itself as a populist revolt whose character, magnitude, disposition, and endgame can only be imagined. And I guarantee you, a Biden victory, and because he will be incredibly harsh and authoritarian, and just they'll pack the Supreme Court. They'll make it so that they will never leave power again. These career politicians will stay there until they're dead, and that's what we don't want. And a civil arrest just seems very, very likely at this point, because I mean, we got the woke progressives that are calling for it. I mean, we can just see the signs at this point that it's coming. It's coming. Whether we like it or not. I'll leave it there. We've got 2 more videos to talk about. I will see you then. Have a good one.